What's up guys, Enrique here with another video, and this time we're going to be putting Roland's newly announced TR-8s head to head against the Elektron Digitakt. So let's get into it. Alright, so the main reason I'm making this video, even though I technically don't own either machine yet, is because I need your help. Basically, I have a live show coming up. I know that a drum machine would do wonders in the set for me, and I finally came down and whittled it down to the conclusion that I want to get the Elektron Digitakt, and then of course, bam, Roland announces a new drum machine. But I also really appreciate your voice and take that into consideration, as well as the YouTube community, because it's a place where all music makers from all kinds can finally come together and share their voice, voicing their opinions towards gear. So I really want to hear from you guys what you guys think. But without further ado, let's get through some of the main differences that really stuck out to me in my current situation, and some of them may pertain to you. Alright, let's get the main first one out of the way, the price points. The Digitakt $749 US and the Roland TR8s is going to be $699 US as of right now that I know. So at a $50 difference, you can argue that that's not too much, but at the same time to somebody that could be like 45 McChicken, so I don't know. You be the judge. So by default, for the price point, I guess I'll just give it to the TR8s. Alright, now let's talk about some of the sampling capabilities. Alright, the TR8 users have finally been waiting for this. The TR8s, hello S, means sample. You can finally play back your own samples. This is awesome. But there's a caveat. You cannot directly sample into the machine. You have to put it onto an SD card first, either a WAV or an AIFF file. Then from there, put it into your machine and take the sounds off of that and put them onto your Roland TR8s. So to some, this may mean that it's not even a sampler, it's just playing back samples. But hey, Roland's trying, it's a start, and they're headed in the right direction, and I like it so far. The Digitakt, on the other hand, you can sample directly into the machine and then kind of assign it to either the pads or the internal plus drive, which we'll get into in the storage section of this video a little later, and manipulate the sounds like quickly, instantly, without having to use a laptop. There are a few things that kind of come with that. For example, you can only record 33 seconds at a time and then have to save that to a pad or the plus drive and then record another 33 seconds. So there's only a 33-second buffer. But a way around that is, of course, plugging it into a computer, and you can drag and drop a lot larger samples from your computer onto the machine itself. Me personally, I feel that these like issues with either the Digitakt or whatever, I find that a user would rarely ever come across, because 33 seconds is a lot of time. I have an MPC 4000 and I don't know what the max sample time is, but I've never gone past like a 40-second sample. That's unless I'm literally like playing in some guitar or some weird stuff, but even then that's not kind of what it was built for. So you can try to tweak it around like that, but yeah, take it or leave it. 33 seconds is what you get. For sampling, the Digitakt wins. After sampling, of course, comes sound design. Basically, what can I do with those samples and how can I tweak them and where can I take them? On the TR8s, you have a total of 11 sounds versus the Digitakt's 8. So you get 3 more sounds on the TR8s versus the Digitakt. And to be completely honest, the sound design on both of these machines vary a lot. On the TR8s, you only have a total of 3 knobs per sound. So you have a pitch, decay, and then a macro knob known as the control knob, which you can then assign to be different things like a high pass filter, low pass filter, compressor, kind of a tone EQ thing. There's a couple different things, but you can only set it to do one thing at a time on the machine. So when you put a sample onto one of the slots, you can't really mingle it up too much. One thing I would like to see is the ability to maybe change the start point versus just the decay, kind of like an ADSR, or maybe have an LFO that can be assigned to the control knob or something like that. But when you really think about it, the TR8s is a pretty much hardcore Roland drum machine. But the Digitakt, on the other hand, has some insane capabilities when it comes to sound design and kind of mangling different samples. You can change the start and end point. You can kind of pseudo slice a sample up and changing parameter locks to the start point of a sample. For example, you have a dedicated trigger, source, amp, filter, and LFO page. And within each of those pages, you have 8 macro knobs to control majority of what the sound parameters do within those pages. So it's pretty much endless. On top of all the parameter locking and pseudo slicing samples using the start points and end points as parameter locks and stuff, it gets really, really crazy, really, really fast. So I guess some of the main Differences between the sound design that really stick out to me, of course, is the actual ADSR or attack, decay, sustain, release that you have per sound on the Digitakt versus just a decay on the TR8s, and an LFO page, which I use a lot because it creates a lot of movement slowly over time when it comes to creating sound. So a quick side note, the TR8s technically has one more filter type than the Digitakt, which is the high pass / low pass filter, versus the Digitakt, which only has a low pass, high pass, or off filter. But I'm not going to count that as like a huge deciding factor because, yeah, it's mainly a bandpass, so whatever. So with all that being said, of course, the Digitakt wins for sound design. Okay, so now let's talk about the sequencers between these two machines. Let's start off with the big fact that the Roland TR8s does not have a MIDI sequencer. It does send MIDI out of its sequencer, but it doesn't have a dedicated MIDI sequencer. The Digitakt, on the other hand, has 8 dedicated MIDI sequencers with 4 notes of polyphony, sort of. It's kind of hard to program, little annoying, but it's there. I'm not going to get into too much of the details. Me personally, I may almost never use it, but the fact that it's there is kind of nice. But with the MIDI information and whatnot set aside, these sequencers are really hard to compare. I had the hardest time trying to decide between these two. While the TR8s has a 16-step sequencer, right, 1 bar, that bar has 8 variations within that pattern. And within that pattern, it lives inside a bank of 15 other patterns, and you have a total of 8 banks. Okay, so let's break this down. The Digitakt has 8 banks, the TR8s has 8 banks. Each of those banks have 16 patterns inside of it. Each of those patterns on the TR8s has 8 variations, or 8 bars, because you can chain them together. The Digitakt only has 4 bars, so you technically get more out of the TR8s, not as much on the Digitakt, but they both provide enough room within their sequencing capabilities to provide a lot of like rhythmic change and variations and chaining and stuff, so I feel like that would never even really be an issue to you guys. The TR8s also has this thing called motion or motion recorder, and what this is pretty similar to parameter locking and recording automation like you would on a Digitakt or any of the other Elektron boxes, except from the videos that I've seen, it seems like it's a bit slower to utilize versus just holding down a note and then turning a knob and having it be there. You kind of have to do a couple of little things, and then the note has to kind of like circle all the way back around until you hear it. So I think the Digitakt handles this a little better. So here's a big win for the TR8s. It has a performance pad. Yes, a pad. Not plural, just one. But I honestly find that to be a huge thing. I don't care how many it has, it at least has one. And this performance pad is velocity sensitive. So me, when I'm programming in something, I'd like to select the drum sound and then kind of play it in by hand and add my own accent to the velocity, basically, of how hard I want it to hit at a certain part and how much softer I want it to be on the other. On the Digitakt, for the other hand, it has no velocity sensitive pads or buttons. They're all kind of buttons. But what the Digitakt has over the TR8s is that you can parameter lock real quick, real easy, all the velocity sensitivity, as well as like conditional triggers and stuff, which are crazy. They're really fun to use. And that kind of goes back to the whole TR8s having that performance pad, but the Digitakt has the conditional triggers, and those are nuts. So for example, you can have a drum trigger only have a 33% chance to hit, which is crazy because it adds so much variation to your sequence. So while that performance pad is a big plus, the one downside of the TR8s is that you cannot turn quantization off. It is always being quantized to the grid. Sure, it has swing, but quantization will always be there. The Digitakt, on the other hand, you can turn it off. So I guess in terms of pattern length, the TR8s does technically win, but in terms of sheer sequencing power with the MIDI sequencer and the sequencer itself with conditional triggers and all that stuff, I gotta give it to the Digitakt. The Digitakt wins. Alright, so now let's talk about some of the storage. We just covered a little bit on how the banks and the patterns and sequences and variations all live within one another, but I want to talk about the sample storage. On the TR8s, you have a total of 600 seconds, aka 10 minutes, of sample time across all samples within the machine and the SD card. On the Digitakt, however, you have 64 megabytes of RAM memory per project, and that doesn't include the 1 gigabyte plus drive that lives inside the Digitakt itself. So per project, you have 64 megabytes of RAM, which equals a little bit over, I want to say 11 minutes of mono sample playback. To me, the Digitakt easily wins. Alright, for all you hardware setup guys, let's talk about the inputs and the outputs of both machines. On the TR8s, you have 8 assignable outputs, as well as a MIDI in and a MIDI through. On the Digitakt, you currently only have the stereo output as well as a headphone output, which you also have on the TR8s, but you have a MIDI in, out, and through. The through part of the MIDI is a big game changer for me because in a live setup or a all hardware setup, the through is probably the most valuable part of your setup. What the through acts as is a mirror of whatever it's coming into the MIDI, so you can kind of chain a bunch of things together without having to worry about one device's MIDI information being sent to another device and corrupting everything. So for example, where the TR8s only has in and out, if I were to run sounds into it to control it, I then have to turn off sounds inside so that it doesn't send notes out, or change one of the global settings so it doesn't send notes out to the next thing, but then that can also filter all of the previous information that I may want to continue on. So the through kind of acts as just a mirror. It's a duplicate or a splitter, for a lack of a better term. But with all that MIDI through stuff aside, that's more of a pet peeve for me. It may not be a deal breaker for you, but to me that's a pretty hefty one to have, or not have in that case. But they both support audio input. Again, the Digitakt, you can use that to sample directly onto the machine. The TR8s, you can use that to send sounds through the effects onto a channel and stuff like that and back out, but you can't actually sample directly from them. The 8 assignable outputs on the TR8s, that's pretty huge, especially for somebody who does an all hardware setup, because you can send sounds to effects and have them come back through those same inputs on the back and have them be mangled up and whatnot within an entire sequence. The Digitakt again only has those 2 outputs, but it also has overbridge in the works at the time of this video. It may be out by the time you see this, but currently it's not out. But when overbridge comes out for the Digitakt, it's game over. It's crazy. You can send all the sounds out of Digitakt to your laptop or computer, whatever it may be, over USB. You never have to mess with audio cables. That is incredible. So sure, while the TR8s has 8 assignable outputs, that also means you need 8 additional inputs on your audio interface to actually utilize all of them, or so on and so forth. Where the Digitakt, you can free up 2 audio inputs because you're just sending audio through the USB versus audio cables. So to me, that's crazy. The Digitakt wins. But as of right now, at the time of this video, the TR8s does win. Okay, so we're kind of getting close to the end. The next couple things are, I guess, the way you vibe with the machine and how it responds to you and the way you like to mess around with the machine. So let's talk about the direct control on the face of either of these units. This again is pretty much a hard one to compare, as most of these are, because on the Digitakt you have such vast sound control of what you can do to a sound, but it's kind of slow because, well, it's not slow, it's really fast, but compared to the TR8s, it's kind of slow because on the TR8s, you have control over all 11 sounds at the same time on the face of the unit, where on the Digitakt, you don't. You have to kind of page around. On the TR8s, I can turn the volume down of the kick drum, change the tuning of the hi-hat, and change the decay of the clap from one page or one spot, where if I wanted to do that on the Digitakt, I'd have to hit track, kick drum, volume down, track, clap, source or sample, turn the tuning down, track, hi-hat, decay, amp page. Like, it's a little slower. Sure, you have the control all feature, but that's kind of broad versus like having control over everything at once. So as far as direct control goes, I have to give it to the TR8s. Alright, so this last category is a little difficult to judge. I'm going to call it fun. How much fun each machine is to play. Now again, I haven't had any experience with the TR8s, but I have had some experience with the TR8, and that thing is fun. But again, as how good a musician's music is to someone, or how beautiful art may be to somebody else, it's all subjective. For me, I understand the Elektron workflow. This allows me to play majority of the Elektron boxes like an instrument. I don't have to think about it. I just kind of go and I know where things are. But this with anything, you know, I don't know how to play guitar, but I'm sure if I tried really hard I can learn and be comfortable with that. But for the moment now, I understand Elektron boxes, so to me it really resonates with me. But the TR8s lends itself to this realm heavily because Its downfall of not having a ton of control over the sound and the sound design means it's kind of cutting through all the fat and leaving you with a lean, mean drumming machine. It's so focused and streamlined to what you can do within it. It's a hardcore drum machine like I mentioned earlier. Now, while they might not be the fanciest, most intricate rhythms you've ever come with, you can come up with them really quick, and on top of that, it helps you get creative, because that's where creativity resides, is in struggle and limitations. That's where our best comes out, I feel. That's my realm. I love having limits on what I can do. So as far as fun goes, we're gonna have to leave this as a tie, because again, it's all kind of relative to whatever speaks to you and whatever resonates with you as a product. So now for the final word. Now I really want the Digitakt to win because I love Elektron boxes, but to be completely honest, the TR-8s has a lot going for it. Whether it be the simple act of editing a drum sound by pressing one button versus a combination of two, or having the ability to pull some volume down and edit the sound of another sound, or something as cheesy as some master effects like a scatter and a autofill function. It's all these little things that kind of add up to a live performance and an improvisation speed that you can't get on some other machines. To me, sometimes those make the biggest difference, because it's moments like that in a live performance that you have a split-second decision to create the most magical moment in your performance, or the ultimate buzzkill of your motivation and inspiration in that live set that you've slowly accumulated up to that point because you missed the beat or you hit the wrong button because you're trying to do a combo of some other things. Now, I know I didn't get into the nitty-gritty, deep details of the two machines head on, but this was kind of a comparison video for myself, looking for a drum machine as a live setup kind of thing, and also something that I can use in the studio later on. So the question that we've all been waiting for, which is probably which one I am going to buy. To be completely honest, I have to give it to the Digitakt, because at the price point you can't really beat it. Basically, for $50 more you get a ton more sound and flexibility out of a machine versus saving that $50. Even though it may be a little tedious at times, to me personally, I just love the process of making music. So I just wanted to compare some of the main big differences to me, as well as get some of your input on which you guys might think of picking up next. So I hope this video helped. If it did, please leave a like down below. It'd be a huge help to me and the channel. If it didn't, give me a thumbs down and let me know why. Also, don't forget to check out my Instagram, where you can find other videos in my more elaborate studio, I guess you can say, and there might be a piece of gear in there that you want to see a video on, so hit me up on there and let me know about it. But without further ado, you guys know the drill, and that is to share the love, share the knowledge. Knowledge is power. Peace.